The Duke of Ravencrest knelt in the middle of Hyde Park's promenade, mud seeping into his expensive breeches, while every member of London's high society watched in stunned silence. "Forgive me," Julian Hartford's voice carried across the crowd, raw and desperate. His dark eyes fixed on the woman in the carriage above him, his wife, the Duchess, whose face had gone pale as winter snow. "Before we wed, I told my friends you were just a dowry to me. I said I'd barely looked at you. I said it was a business arrangement, nothing more." Gasps rippled through the assembled lords and ladies. Fans snapped open. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Lady Evangeline Hartford's gloved hands trembled against her emerald day dress. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and the entire ton leaned forward, hungry for her response. "I was a fool," Julian continued, his voice breaking. "I was blind. And you heard every word, didn't you?" The Duchess nodded once, unable to speak, and the crowd collectively held its breath, waiting to see if England's most powerful Duchess would forgive the man who'd shattered her heart, or destroy him where he knelt. If you're loving this drama already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who loves a good romance with revenge, redemption, and a duke who's about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's go back to where this all began, 3 weeks before a wedding that would change everything. The seamstresses pulled the ivory silk tighter, and Evangeline Beaumont couldn't breathe. She stood on a raised platform in her mother's drawing room, surrounded by mirrors that reflected a stranger draped in lace and illusions. The wedding gown was exquisite, Brussels lace, seed pearls sewn by hand, a train that would trail 6 feet behind her down the aisle of St. George's Church. "You look perfect." Her mother clapped her hands together, eyes bright with triumph. "Absolutely perfect. You'll be the most beautiful bride of the season." Evangeline touched the bodice, feeling the boning press against her ribs. She'd only met her betrothed twice. Both times, Julian Hartford, Duke of Ravencrest, had looked at her with the same polite disinterest one might show a moderately pleasant painting in someone else's home. The door burst open, and her father swept in with a bottle of champagne, his face flushed with victory. The Duke of Ravencrest himself. He chuckled happily. "My daughter, a soon-to-be Duchess. It's going to be the wealthiest match of the entire season." Evangeline's hands dropped to her sides as her father popped the cork. The seamstresses scattered, used to the interruption. Her mother rushed to fetch glasses while Evangeline remained frozen on the platform, like a doll being dressed for display. £30,000 a year, her father continued, pouring champagne with unsteady hands. "Plus the estates, the London house, the hunting box in Scotland. You've done well, girl. Very well indeed." She'd seen the settlement papers he'd left on his desk 2 nights ago. The numbers next to her name had made her feel like livestock at auction. £60,000 dowry. Her mother's family jewels. The cotton mill shares her grandfather had left her. All of it transferred to the Duke upon marriage, and in return, she would become the Duchess of Ravencrest with a generous allowance and the dubious privilege of managing his households. "To my daughter," her father raised his glass. "May you be as successful at securing the Duke's heart as you've been at securing his name." Evangeline accepted the champagne with numb fingers. The bubbles burst against her tongue, tasteless. Through the window, she could see the street where carriages passed in endless parade. Somewhere in this city, Julian Hartford was going about his day, probably not thinking of her at all. She'd first met him at Lady Ashford's ball, 6 weeks ago. Her mother had steered her directly into his path near the refreshment table, an orchestrated collision disguised as chance. "Your Grace," her mother had simpered. "May I present my daughter, Lady Evangeline Beaumont?" Julian had turned, and Evangeline's breath had caught. The whispers hadn't lied. He was devastatingly handsome. Dark hair that fell just slightly too long, as though he couldn't be bothered with fashion. Eyes as green as emeralds. A jaw that could cut glass. He wore his formal attire with the ease of someone born to it, power sitting comfortable on his broad shoulders. "Lady Evangeline." He bowed, perfectly correct. His eyes had swept over her, her face, her gown, her careful curls, with the same cursory assessment one might give a horse at an auction. "A pleasure." "The pleasure is mine, Your Grace." She'd curtsied, heart hammering, trying to think of something clever to say, something memorable. But he'd already turned back to his companion, Lord Ashford, resuming their conversation about hunting as though she'd ceased to exist the moment politeness allowed. 3 weeks later, her father had announced the engagement. The contracts had been signed before she'd even seen the Duke a second time. Their second meeting had been at the opera, a formal outing arranged by both families. She'd sat beside him in his private box, acutely aware of the inches between them, the way he smelled of bergamot and leather, the way his hands looked holding the program, strong, elegant, and completely indifferent to her presence. During the intermission, she'd gathered her courage. The soprano is quite remarkable, don't you think? Julian had glanced at her as though surprised she could speak. Indeed. Excuse me, I see Lord Pemberton. Business matters. He'd stood and left her sitting alone while the entire opera house watched, their pitying glances burning into her skin. When he'd returned for the second act, he hadn't apologized or explained. He'd simply sat down and fixed his attention on the stage as though the previous hour of abandonment had never occurred. Now, standing in her wedding gown 3 weeks before the ceremony, Evangeline wondered what her life would look like married to a man who treated her like furniture. Evangeline. Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. Darling, you've gone pale. Are you unwell? I'm fine, Mama. She forced a smile, the same smile she'd been perfecting since childhood. Pleasant, agreeable, unremarkable, simply overwhelmed by the beauty of the gown. Her mother beamed, missing entirely the hollow note in her daughter's voice. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of fittings, planning, and endless social engagements where Evangeline and Julian were paraded before society like prize specimens. Garden parties where they exchanged stilted pleasantries. Morning calls where they sat in silence while their mothers chattered. Dinners where he spoke to everyone except her. She studied him during these encounters, trying to understand the man she would be bound to for life. He was intelligent, that much was clear from the political discussions he engaged in with passion. He was well-read, well-traveled, comfortable in any social setting. His younger sister Catherine adored him. She'd mentioned it during a brief conversation at Lady Weatherby's musicale. Julian is wonderful, Catherine had gushed, all 18 years of enthusiasm bubbling over. He sent me to the best schools, lets me read whatever I wish. He's not like other brothers who treat their sisters like delicate china. Evangeline had smiled and nodded, wondering how a man who showed such care for his sister could look at his betrothed with such complete indifference. The answer came the night before the wedding, and it arrived like a knife between the ribs. Ravencrest House loomed before her carriage, all elegant Portland stone and countless windows glowing with welcoming light. The pre-wedding dinner was a grand affair, both families, close friends, important political allies. Evangeline wore her finest gown, rose silk that her mother insisted brought out the color in her cheeks. She felt like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. The dinner was interminable. Evangeline sat beside Julian, their chairs so close his sleeve occasionally brushed hers, sending unwanted awareness through her traitorous body. He was the perfect host, charming, attentive to every guest at the table, ensuring glasses stayed full and conversation flowed. Everyone except his betrothed. He spoke over her to Lord Ashford, turned away from her to address his grandmother, the formidable Dowager Duchess Augusta, who presided over the tables head like a queen surveying her kingdom. Asked the lady on his other side about her opinion on the latest agricultural innovations while Evangeline sat silent, ignored, invisible. Her head began to pound. The room felt too small, too hot, too full of laughter that scraped against her nerves. The candles flickered, their light too bright. Her corset squeezed her ribs until each breath felt forced. She couldn't do this. She couldn't sit here for one more moment pretending this was normal, that she was happy, that tomorrow she would willingly bind herself to this beautiful, cruel indifference. Excuse me. Evangeline set down her fork with careful precision, every eye turning to her. I'm feeling unwell. Please forgive me. Julian glanced at her, the first time he'd looked at her all evening. Shall I call for a physician? His voice held polite concern, nothing more. The same tone he'd use for any guest who'd taken ill. No, thank you. I simply need rest. She stood, and the gentleman rose with her. "Please, continue. I wouldn't dream of disrupting such a lovely evening." Augusta's sharp eyes tracked her movement. "Of course, dear child. Rest well. Tomorrow is a very important day." Something in the Dowager Duchess's tone made Evangeline pause, but her head throbbed too viciously to analyze it. She curtsied to the table and fled. The corridor outside the dining room stretched long and dark, lit by wall sconces that cast dancing shadows. Evangeline walked slowly, trying to breathe, trying to calm the panic rising in her throat. Her slippers made no sound on the marble floors. Somewhere in the house, she could hear the faint sounds of servants preparing for tomorrow's wedding breakfast. Hundreds of guests, thousands of flowers, and a marriage built on contracts and indifference. Then a maid stumbled upon her and chirped up the second she saw her. "Miss Evangeline, it seems you left your shawl in the dining room." Evangeline touched her neck faintly and sighed. "So it seems. Thank you, I'll go get it." The maid bowed and left, and Evangeline slowly began to make her way back to the dining room. Voices drifted from an open door ahead. The smoking room, she realized. The gentlemen must have excused themselves during dessert. She should turn around, find another route to her assigned chambers. But Lord Ashford's booming laugh stopped her. "Come now, Hartford. Surely you must feel some affection for your betrothed." Evangeline's feet rooted to the floor. Her heart stopped. Another voice, Lord Pemberton perhaps. The girl's pretty enough. Those eyes could make a man forget himself. Then Julian's voice, cold as a January frost, finally reached her ears. "Affection." Evangeline's hand found the wall. The marble was cool against her palm, solid, the only real thing in a world that had started feeling like she was in a dream state. "She's just a dowry to me." The words fell like stones into still water, ripples spreading outward, destroying everything they touched. The silence stretched for God knows how long. Then Julian continued, each word carefully enunciated. "A very generous dowry that will restore Ravencrest's coffers, but a dowry nonetheless. I've barely looked at the girl." Laughter erupted from the room. Lord Ashford practically howled. "Brutal honesty, Hartford. I appreciate a man who speaks plainly." "It's a business arrangement." Julian's voice held no emotion, no regret, nothing but cool statement of fact. "Nothing more. Pour me another brandy." Evangeline stood in the corridor, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other clutching the wall as though it could keep her from shattering. The hallway spun. Her vision blurred. Every careful breath she'd taken all evening escaped in one sharp gasp. Her dream state had become a nightmare in an instant. A maid appeared from a side passage. "My lady, are you quite okay?" "I'm fine." The lie came automatically, voice steady despite the screaming in her head. "Thank you." She walked to her chambers, each step measured, her spine straight and her head high. Only when the door locked behind her did she move, but not to the bed to weep, not to the window to stare at the London night and mourn her shattered illusions. Instead, she walked to the small escritoire in the corner and pulled out paper, pen, and ink. Her hand shook as she dipped the nib. One tear fell, splashing on the pristine paper, smudging the corner. She blotted it dry and began to write. List of political allies. Lady Weatherby, her husband sits on 3 parliamentary committees. Passionate about education reform. Lady Somerset, her salon attracts both Whigs and Tories. Known for sharp political mind. Countess of Pemberton, controls charitable foundations throughout London. The pen scratched across paper, steady now, purposeful. She wrote names, connections, weaknesses, opportunities. Every lady she'd been introduced to over the past weeks. Every gentleman whose wife might be sympathetic to a duchess who knew how to cultivate the right friendships. List of investment opportunities. Railway shares, expansion towards Scotland. Textile mills, northern manufacturing. Property, London Docklands development. She picked up another page. Her dowry would transfer to Julian upon marriage, but the settlement guaranteed her a substantial allowance. She'd studied the contract carefully while her father thought she was simply admiring the elaborate legal script. £5,000 annually for her personal use, no questions asked, no accounting required. £5,000 could become 10 with the right investments. And 10 could become 20. Money was power, and she would need power for what came next. Through her chamber window, she could still hear the dinner party's distant laughter. The men would be deep in their brandy now, cigars lit, guards down. Julian would be entertaining them with more observations about his convenient marriage, perhaps. More jokes about the business arrangement. More casual cruelty delivered with that beautiful, indifferent voice. Evangeline set down her pen and looked at what she'd created. 3 pages of careful notes. The beginning of a plan. The foundation of something she couldn't quite name yet but felt burning in her chest where her heart used to be. She wasn't the naive girl who'd walked into this house tonight, hoping her husband might learn to care for her. That girl had died in a corridor outside a smoking room, murdered by words she was never meant to hear. The woman who would walk down the aisle tomorrow was someone different. Someone harder. Someone who understood exactly what this marriage was, a business arrangement, nothing more. And if Julian Hartford, Duke of Ravencrest, wanted a business arrangement, then by God, he would get one. She picked up her pen again and added one final note at the bottom of the page. Remember this feeling. Remember what it cost. Make him pay. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. George's Church, painting rainbow patterns across white marble floors. Evangeline walked down the aisle alone. Her father had offered his arm, but she declined with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. The organ thundered, hundreds of faces turned to watch her progress, and at the altar, Julian Hartford waited in his formal attire, devastatingly handsome and utterly unaware that the woman approaching him was no longer the biddable girl he'd agreed to marry. She'd taken extra care with her appearance this morning. Her maid had woven pearls through her hair, applied rouge to her lips, ensured every detail was flawless. If Julian Hartford thought he'd barely looked at her before, she would make certain he looked now, and spent the rest of his life regretting what he dismissed so easily. Julian turned as she reached the altar, and something flickered across his face. Surprise. Perhaps. His eyes widened slightly, traveling from her face down the elaborate gown and back up again. She watched him see her, really see her, for the first time. Too late, she thought coldly, and smiled at him with perfect, empty politeness. The ceremony proceeded. The bishop droned through ancient words about love and cherishing, honor and devotion. Evangeline responded in a clear voice when required, each vow falling from her lips like stones into a well, heavy, final, and echoing in the darkness. When Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand lingered for a heartbeat longer than necessary. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, and she felt the warmth of his skin through her glove. She met his eyes with that same serene smile and withdrew her hand as soon as propriety allowed. The wedding breakfast at Ravencrest House was a blur of champagne toasts and congratulations. Evangeline was effervescent, laughing at every joke, charming every guest. She danced with Lord Ashford and thanked him for being such a good friend to her husband. She complimented Lord Pemberton's wife on her gown and secured an invitation to her next salon. She made Lady Weatherby promise to introduce her to the charitable committee she'd mentioned at the opera. Through it all, Julian watched her with growing confusion. She could feel his gaze following her around the ballroom, but she never looked at him directly, never sought him out. Treated him with the same pleasant courtesy she showed every other guest, nothing more, nothing less. "You seem different," he said when they finally danced together, required by tradition. His hand at her waist burned through the layers of silk and lace. "Way happier than I expected." "Expected, Your Grace." She looked somewhere past his shoulder, at the other couples swirling around them. "Whatever do you mean? I thought you might be nervous. Most brides are, I'm told. How thoughtful of you to consider my feelings. I assure you, I'm perfectly composed." His brow furrowed. He opened his mouth to speak but quickly thought against it. Evangeline watched the expression on his face without saying a word, then looked over his shoulder, brightening up immediately. "There's Lady Somerset. I simply must speak with her before she leaves. She's agreed to sponsor me at her next political salon. You don't mind, do you?" Before he could answer, the music ended, and she pulled away with a curtsy. She could feel his confusion radiating across the space between them as she swept toward Lady Somerset with renewed animation, already deep in conversation before he'd taken 2 steps. The night wore on. Guests began departing, calling congratulations and well wishes. Augusta, magnificent in purple silk, kissed Evangeline's cheek and whispered, "Welcome to the family, Evangeline. Though I must say, I found your performance quite interesting." Evangeline met the Dowager Duchess's sharp eyes and said nothing, letting her walk away. Finally, mercifully, the last guest departed. The servants cleared away the debris of celebration. Evangeline stood at the window of the main drawing room, watching carriages disappear into the London night. "Evangeline." Julian's voice came from behind her. "I thought we might." She turned, and he stopped mid-sentence. In the candlelight, with her wedding gown glowing like captured moonlight, she looked ethereal. "Yes, husband." The word was perfectly pronounced, perfectly courteous, and perfectly cold. Julian cleared his throat. "I thought we might retire together. I'm quite exhausted, Your Grace." She moved past him toward the door, leaving a trail of orange blossom perfume. "Perhaps we might delay marital obligations until we're both more settled? I wouldn't want our first," she paused delicately, "encounter to be rushed or uncomfortable." His face went through several expressions: surprise, relief, disappointment, and confusion. "Of course. I didn't mean to presume. I only thought." "How considerate." She smiled that empty smile again. "Good night, husband." She left him standing in the drawing room, one hand raised as though to stop her, words dying on his lips. In her chambers, her new chambers as Duchess of Ravencrest, Evangeline finally allowed herself to feel. Her maid unlaced her gown with gentle hands while Evangeline stared at her reflection. The pearls in her hair caught lamplight. The ring on her finger, his grandmother's ring, she'd been told, felt heavy as an anchor. "Shall I prepare your nightgown, Your Grace?" the maid asked softly. "Yes, thank you, Mary." Evangeline had made it her business to learn every servant's name over the past weeks. Servants saw everything, heard everything, and loyalty was bought with kindness and good wages. "And Mary? Tomorrow, please find out which ladies' maids are friends with the maids in Lord Ashford's household. I'd like to know which social events he'll be attending this season." If Mary found the request odd, she didn't show it. "Of course, Your Grace." When she was finally alone, Evangeline pulled out the papers she'd brought from her father's house, her lists, her plans. She added notes from tonight's conversations, connections made, opportunities identified. By the time she extinguished her candle, dawn was creeping through the windows, and she had the skeleton of a strategy that would either make her the most powerful Duchess in London or destroy her completely. But she didn't care which, as long as Julian Hartford learned that dowries, like duchesses, could have teeth. The first week of marriage established the pattern. Evangeline transformed into a social butterfly, hosting morning calls that quickly became the most sought-after invitations in London. Her drawing room filled with influential ladies who found the new Duchess charming, intelligent, and surprisingly well-informed about politics. "My dear Duchess," Lady Weatherby exclaimed over tea and delicate cakes, "you simply must join our charitable committee. We're raising funds for foundling hospitals, and your perspective would be invaluable." "I would be honored." Evangeline poured tea with practiced grace, remembering exactly how each lady preferred it. "Tell me, what causes are closest to your heart? I want to ensure my efforts align with genuine need rather than fashionable sympathy." The ladies practically glowed. By the time they left, Evangeline had secured positions on 3 charitable committees, 2 of which were chaired by wives of Julian's political rivals. Julian arrived home that evening to find his drawing room transformed into what looked like the aftermath of a diplomatic summit. Teacups everywhere, scattered programs from various charitable organizations, and his wife at the center of it all, laughing with Lady Somerset. "Ah, husband." Evangeline's face lit up with that bright, empty smile. "Did you have a pleasant day at your club?" "Yes, quite pleasant." He looked around at the controlled chaos. "You've been entertaining." "The Duchess is a marvel," Lady Somerset announced, gathering her things. She's agreed to speak at my next salon about agricultural improvements on ducal estates. Apparently, she's been studying crop rotation. Julian's eyebrows rose. Has she now? Your estate records are fascinating reading, Evangeline said sweetly. So much potential for improvement. After Lady Somerset departed, Julian found Evangeline in his study, his account books spread across the desk. What are you doing? She didn't look up. Your tenant rents are criminally low. Also, this crop rotation system is inefficient. I've drafted some improvements. She pushed a paper toward him, covered in her elegant handwriting and detailed calculations. Your steward agrees with my assessment. You've discussed my estates with my steward. His voice held an edge. Was I not supposed to? She looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. I'm the Duchess now. Managing the household is my responsibility. Is it not? The estates are part of the household. That's not. He stopped, frustration crossing his features. These are family traditions, Evangeline. Methods passed down for generations. Traditions don't feed people, Julian. She stood, gathering her papers. But if you prefer outdated methods to actual productivity, by all means, continue as you were. I'll focus my attention elsewhere. She swept past him, leaving him holding her detailed proposals, unable to find fault with her logic even as irritation burned in his chest. If you're loving how Evangeline is already turning the tables, make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what you'd do in her position, forgiveness or revenge. Because trust me, she's only getting started, and Julian has no idea what's coming for him. By the second week, Evangeline had transformed the library into a weekly political salon. She invited carefully selected guests, Whigs and Tories both, the kind of mixed gathering that made real policy happen in the spaces between official channels. The Corn Laws are strangling trade, Lord Blackwood argued over brandy and cigars. He was a Whig, young and progressive. The Corn Laws protect English farmers, countered Lord Hartley, an old Tory who'd served with Julian's father. The Corn Laws protect landowners at the expense of the poor, Evangeline interjected smoothly. She sat at the pianoforte, ostensibly providing background music, but everyone had stopped pretending she wasn't the real reason they'd come. Lord Hartley, I've read your speeches about agricultural protection. Brilliant rhetoric. But have you considered that protected markets lead to complacency? Lord Blackwood's concerns about innovation have merit. Both men stared at her. She smiled and played a complicated Mozart piece while they absorbed her words. Julian, relegated to the corner like a guest in his own library, watched his wife navigate political waters with surgical precision. She agreed with him on nothing, challenged him on everything, always with that sweet smile that was starting to drive him nuts. Did you enjoy the evening, husband? She asked after the last guest departed, finding him still in the library, nursing brandy. You contradicted me 4 times in front of Lord Hartley. Did I now? She tilted her head, the picture of innocent confusion. How careless of me. I simply become so passionate about progress. Her eyes were ice. Forgive me if I embarrassed you. You didn't embarrass me. He set down his glass with more force than necessary. You're brilliant, and everyone knows it. That's not the problem. Then what is the problem, Your Grace? The problem is, you're my wife, and you treat me like a stranger. Silence fell between them, heavy and charged. Evangeline's mask didn't slip. Aren't we strangers? She asked softly. We barely knew each other when we wed. A business arrangement, I believe someone called it. Nothing more. She left before he could respond, and Julian sat alone in his library, wondering when exactly he'd lost control of his own household and why the thought of his wife's cold politeness bothered him more than it should. By the 3rd week, Evangeline made her boldest move yet. She met with her solicitor in secret, in a small office far from Mayfair's prying eyes. I want controlling interest in these railway shares, she said, pushing a list across the desk. And I want to purchase Lord Ashford's gambling vowels. Discreetly. The solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Richard who'd served her grandfather, raised his eyebrows. Lord Ashford owes considerable sums, Your Grace. This would require most of your annual allowance. I'm aware. Do it, she said calmly. May I ask why? Evangeline smiled, and there was nothing pleasant in it. Lord Ashford is friends with my husband. Very close friends. Friends who share confidences over brandy and cigars. I'd like to own those confidences. Understanding dawned in Mr. Pemberton's eyes. I see. And the railway shares? She smiled as she spoke. They will triple in value within 6 months when the northern expansion is announced. My grandfather taught me to read market patterns before I was 12. She stood, pulling on her gloves. I'll return next week with additional investments. I intend to be very wealthy, Mr. Richard. Wealthy enough that my husband's money becomes irrelevant. Your Grace, Mr. Richard said carefully, if I may observe, you're playing a dangerous game. No, Mr. Richard. She paused at the door. I'm playing the only game I was ever allowed to play. But this time, I'm simply playing to win. That evening, Julian Stewart requested an urgent meeting. Your Grace, the Duchess has requested the full estate books. All of them, including the investments and outstanding debts. Julian found Evangeline in his study again, surrounded by ledgers that should have taken weeks to review. Yet she'd done it in 3 days. What exactly are you doing? He asked. Your mining investments are hemorrhaging money, she said without looking up. You're putting funds into a Cornwall tin mine that exhausted its profitable veins 2 years ago. I recommend divesting immediately and putting those funds into Staffordshire coal. Also, you're owed £17,000 by various lords. I've made a list of who should be pressed for payment and who should be forgiven strategically. Strategically? He asked, moving closer, drawn despite himself by her casual competence. Lord Morrison will never pay, but his vote on your education bill is worth more than his debt. Forgive it, make him grateful, secure his support. She tapped the relevant ledger. Lord Thornbury can pay and will if pressed. He has no political value to you. Collect. Julian stared at the woman he'd married, this stranger who'd somehow learned more about his holdings in 3 weeks than he'd absorbed in 10 years of managing them. Where did you learn this? My grandfather. She finally looked at him, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something akin to grief. He believed women should understand money since we're traded for it so often. The bitterness in her voice was so faint he almost missed it. Before he could respond, she'd gathered her papers and stood. I've also accepted an invitation to sponsor your sister Catherine's debut next season. She wrote me the loveliest letter about wanting to come to London. I thought you'd approve. Catherine. His wild, brilliant sister who terrified most of society with her opinions and her refusal to simper. Catherine is difficult, he said carefully. Most ladies don't know what to do with her. Most ladies are idiots. Evangeline's smile was genuine for the first time since their wedding. Catherine sounds delightful. I look forward to helping her shine rather than trying to dull her edges. She left him standing in his study, holding ledgers that proved his wife was smarter than him, and wondering why that realization felt less like insult and more like the first stirring of something dangerously close to admiration. By the 4th month, Julian Hartford realized he was in love with his wife, and the knowledge was destroying him. It happened gradually. He'd watch her at breakfast, reviewing correspondence with the same focused intensity she brought to everything, her hair still slightly mussed from sleep, and feel his chest constrict. He'd overhear her speaking kindly to a nervous footman and want to pull her into his arms. He'd find notes she'd left for his steward, brilliant observations about crop yields and tenant welfare, and he'd burn with the need to tell her she was extraordinary. But she wouldn't let him close enough to say the words. The morning Catherine arrived from the country, Julian found his sister and his wife in the morning room, heads bent together over fashion plates and laughing like old friends. Julian. Catherine leapt up and embraced him. Evangeline is the most wonderful person. She's going to take me to lectures at the Royal Institution. Lectures? Can you imagine? Most ladies prefer balls to lectures, he said carefully. Most ladies are boring, Evangeline replied, not looking up from the fashion plates. Catherine is brilliant. We'll attend balls too, of course, but why waste that mind on gossip when she could be learning? Catherine positively glowed. Over the next weeks, Evangeline transformed his sister from an awkward country girl into a confident young woman who could discuss philosophy and politics without apology. She introduced Catherine to Lord Thornbury, a young viscount who listened to Catherine's opinions about social reform with genuine interest rather than condescension. Julian watched his sister fall in love with a good man, watched her bloom under Evangeline's guidance, and felt gratitude war with a longing in his chest. "Thank you," he told Evangeline one evening after Catherine and Thornbury had announced their engagement. "For Catherine. For giving her something I never could." Evangeline finally met his eyes. "I gave her permission to be herself. You could have done the same." "I wouldn't have known how," he admitted. "No," she agreed softly. "I don't suppose you would have." She left him standing in the corridor, and Julian pressed his palm to the wall where she'd stood, trying to understand why every conversation with his wife felt like reaching for something just beyond his grasp. The breaking point finally came during the club incident. Julian arrived at White's for his usual Thursday evening to find Lord Ashford waiting with an uncomfortable expression. "Hartford. Bit awkward, this, but you're aware the club has new ownership." "New ownership?" Julian frowned. His grandfather had been one of White's founding members. "Yes, well." Ashford cleared his throat. "Controlling shares were purchased last month by, and I quote, Her Grace, the Duchess of Ravencrest." The world tilted. "My wife owns my club." "Majority shares?" "Yes. She's been quite reasonable about it, actually. Proposing some modernizations, opening membership to more progressive gentlemen. The committee voted to approve her suggestions this morning." Julian found Evangeline in the library that evening, reading as though she hadn't just appended his entire world. "You bought my club," he announced rather than asked. She turned a page. The investment seemed sound. "White's has been hemorrhaging money for years due to poor management. I've proposed reforms that should triple its profitability within 2 years." "That's not what I'm talking about." He crossed the room, needing to be closer, needing her to look at him. "This is madness. What do you want from me?" She set down her book and stood, finally giving him her full attention. In the lamplight, she was heartbreakingly beautiful, and completely out of reach. "Want from you," she repeated. "Nothing at all, Your Grace. I have everything I need." Frustration exploded through him. "You have my club, my estates are run according to your plans, my sister adores you more than me, half of Parliament seeks your counsel before mine, and you claim to want nothing. What would you have me want?" Her voice was quiet, dangerous. "Your affection? Your regard? The things you made clear before our wedding I would never have." "I never said that." "You said exactly that." Her composure cracked, just slightly. "The night before we wed. The smoking room. I heard every word, Julian. She's just a dowry to me. A very generous dowry. I've barely looked at the girl." "Those were your exact words." The blood drained from Julian's face. "Evangeline, please. Don't." She held up a hand, and he saw it tremble before she curled it into a fist. "You were honest. I appreciate honesty. And I've built something from that honesty, a life where I matter for more than my father's money. Where I have power that belongs to me, not borrowed from my husband's indifference." "You think I'm indifferent to you?" He moved closer, desperate. "Evangeline, I..." "Stop." Her voice broke. "Please, just stop." But he couldn't stop, not now, not when she was finally letting him see past the perfect facade to the hurt beneath. "I was a fool," he said, the words tumbling out. "I said those things because I was angry about the marriage, about having to sell myself to save the estates, about losing control of my own life. You were innocent in all of it, and I took out my frustration by diminishing you. It was cruel and stupid, and I've regretted it every day since I started actually seeing you." "Started seeing me?" She laughed, but it was hollow. "And when was that, Julian?" "When I became useful. When I started making you money and smoothing your political path. No. It was when you demolished Lord Blackwood's argument about trade restrictions with 3 sentences and a smile. When you stayed up until dawn helping Catherine practice her presentation for the Royal Institution. When I found you in the stables at sunrise feeding apples to the horses and talking to them like friends. His voice dropped. When I realized the woman I married is extraordinary, and I've been in love with her for months while she won't even look at me. Silence. Evangeline stared at him, her mask finally, completely shattered. You can't, she whispered. You can't do this. I can't do what? Tell you the truth. She pressed her hands to her face. I've been so careful, so controlled. I built walls around everything you said that night, and I used those walls to make myself stronger. If you tear them down now. What? He closed the distance between them, close enough to see her pupils dilate, her breath quicken. What happens if the walls come down? I just might forgive you, she said, and tears finally spilled down her cheeks. And I don't know if I can survive forgiving you. Julian's heart broke. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with gentle hands. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. Every day. For the rest of our lives. She closed her eyes, and he felt the war raging inside her, pride against longing, hurt against hope. I don't know how, she admitted. I don't know how to let you close enough to hurt me again. Then don't. Not yet. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in, orange blossoms and ink and the faint scent of the horses she rode every morning when she thought no one was watching. Just let me prove myself. Let me show you that the man you married can become the man worthy of you. Before she could answer, a throat cleared from the doorway. They sprang apart to find Augusta watching with sharp, satisfied eyes. How long have you been standing there? Julian demanded. Long enough to confirm my suspicions. The Dowager Duchess swept into the room. You're both making this unnecessarily complicated. Grandmother, this isn't the time. Oh, do be quiet, Julian. Augusta turned to Evangeline. Tell him. Evangeline's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. Tell him about Lord Westbrook at Lady Ashford's ball. Tell him why you danced with that peacock 3 times. Julian's jaw clenched. Westbrook. Evangeline's face flushed. That was nothing. He was helping me. Helping you make my grandson insane with jealousy, Augusta finished. I may be old, but I'm not blind. You've been testing him, girl. Every move you've made has been designed to see if he'd grovel or not. That's not. Evangeline stopped, then laughed shakily. All right. Perhaps a little. Julian stared at his wife. You were testing me, he said angrily. You hurt me, she said simply. I needed to know if you'd fight for me or let me go. Fight for you. He moved closer, backing her against the bookshelf. Evangeline, I've been fighting for you since the moment I realized what I'd thrown away. I've watched Westbrook touch you and wanted to make him eat my fist. I've sat through your salons hearing other men praise your brilliance and wanted to shout that you're mine. I've endured 4 months of your perfect, terrible politeness while dying inside because you won't let me love you. Her breath caught. Julian, please stop. I love you, he said fiercely. I love your mind that's sharper than mine. I love your kindness to people who can't help you. I love how you ride like you're racing the wind. I love that you're richer than me now and absolutely should be. I love that you bought my club just to prove you could. I love every brilliant, terrifying thing about you, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you if you'll let me. Oh, for heaven's sake, Augusta muttered. Kiss the girl, Julian. I haven't got all night. Julian ignored his grandmother, his entire focus on his wife. Evangeline, he called softly. She looked up at him, walls crumbling, heart in her eyes. I'm still angry with you. I know. I don't know if I can forget what you said. I don't expect you to. But I've been falling in love with you anyway, she whispered. And I hate that I have been. I hate that somewhere between watching you implement my estate improvements and defending me to Lord Ashford about being too managing, I started wanting this to be real. But it is. He framed her face with his hands. This is the most real thing in my life. You are the most real thing. Let me prove it. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for lies and finding only desperate honesty. Then, slowly, she rose on her toes and kissed him. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the passion Julian had imagined during countless sleepless nights. But it tasted like forgiveness and possibility, and when she pulled back, her smile was genuine for the first time since their wedding. "We're starting over," she said firmly. "Properly. You're going to court me the way you should have from the beginning." Yes. He'd agree to anything if she kept looking at him like that. "And I'm keeping the club. Obviously. And my political salon," she added. "I wouldn't dream of interfering. And if you ever make me feel like just a dowry again." "I won't," he swore. "Evangeline, you're my everything. The dowry was just the excuse that fate used to bring you to me." Augusta cleared her throat pointedly. "Lovely. Very touching. But I believe there's something you should know." They both turned to the Dowager Duchess, who looked entirely too pleased with herself. "What?" Julian asked warily. "I arranged for Evangeline to overhear you that night." The room went silent. Evangeline's hand found the bookshelf for support. "What did you say?" "The door was left open deliberately. I had my maid mention to you that you'd left your shawl in the dining room, which required passing that very corridor." Augusta's smile was sharp. "I needed to know if this girl had the spine to handle you, Julian. Your father was stubborn as an ox, and you're much worse. So you orchestrated my humiliation." Evangeline's voice was dangerously quiet. "I orchestrated your triumph," Augusta corrected. "Look at what you've built, child. Look at who you've become. You're the most powerful Duchess in London. You've transformed my grandson from an arrogant fool into a man who kneels before you, metaphorically speaking, though I suspect literal kneeling isn't far behind." Julian's hands clenched. "Grandmother, you had no right." "I had every right. I'm the matriarch of this family, and I needed someone strong enough to save it." She looked at Evangeline with genuine warmth. "I needed you." Evangeline stared at the old woman who'd manipulated her pain into power. She was utterly furious. But underneath the anger was something else, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. "You used me," she said quietly. "I tested you," Augusta replied. "And you passed magnificently. Now the question is, what will you do with everything you've built?" Evangeline looked at Julian, who was watching her with desperate hope and newly kindled anger at his grandmother's interference. She looked at the library where she'd held court with politicians and peers. She looked at her own hands, which had signed contracts and balanced ledgers and built an empire from humiliation. Then she started laughing. Both Julian and Augusta stared at her. "This is absurd," Evangeline gasped between laughs. "All of this. The scheming, the revenge, She looked at Augusta. "You're absolutely terrifying." "Thank you, dear." That wasn't a compliment. But Evangeline was still smiling. She turned to Julian. "Your grandmother is manipulative and ruthless. I'm aware. I think I might actually like her." Augusta beamed. "I knew you were perfect for this family." "I didn't say I forgave her," Evangeline added quickly. "Or you." She poked Julian's chest. "You still have considerable groveling to do. Name your terms." "Oh, I will." Her smile turned wicked. "I'm going to make you work for this, Julian Hartford. I'm going to make you court me properly, worship me publicly, and prove every single day that I'm worth more than my dowry." "You are," he said fervently. "You're worth everything. Prove it." And so began the strangest courtship London society had ever witnessed. The Duke and Duchess of Ravencrest, already married, proceeding to fall in love in full view of the ton. Julian sent flowers every morning, not roses, but obscure blooms he knew she'd find interesting, with notes about their botanical properties. Evangeline sent him books on agricultural innovation with her own annotations in the margins. They attended the opera and actually watched the performance instead of conducting business. They rode together in Hyde Park, racing their horses until Catherine complained they were causing scandals. "Let them talk," Julian said, catching Evangeline's hand as their horses slowed. "I don't care what anyone thinks as long as you're smiling." And she was smiling. Genuinely, freely, the walls between them crumbling a little more each day. The ton watched, fascinated, as the Duke became besotted with his own wife. Lord Ashford joked about it at White's, Evangeline's White's now, though she'd graciously allowed the original members to retain their privileges. "Hartford's completely mad for her," Ashford told a group of gentlemen over cards. "Saw him turn down a vote trading opportunity because it conflicted with her salon schedule. The old Hartford would never." "The new Hartford is smarter," Lord Blackwood observed. "The Duchess has more political influence than half of Parliament combined. Smart man keeps her happy." If you're invested in this love story and want to see how it all ends, make sure you stay until the very end. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and drop a comment telling me whether you think Evangeline should make Julian grovel a little bit more or if he's suffered enough. Now, let's see how this all comes together at Hyde Park. 5 months after their wedding, on a perfect June morning, Julian made his decision. He'd been planning it for weeks, consulting with Catherine and, surprisingly, with Augusta, who'd been unexpectedly helpful once she stopped gloating about her machinations. The entire ton would be at the Hyde Park promenade. Every important family, every gossip, every person whose opinion shaped society. It was the most public venue imaginable. And it was absolutely perfect for Julian's plan. Evangeline rode in the Duchess's carriage beside Augusta, discussing the latest parliamentary session. Julian rode his black stallion ahead, and the crowd parted for him as it always did, deference to power, to title, to the natural order of things. Then he stopped his horse and dismounted. The crowd's chatter faltered. Something was happening. People craned their necks to see. Julian walked to the Duchess's carriage, and the entire promenade went silent. Evangeline's eyes widened. "Julian, what's going on?" He knelt. On the gravel path, in his expensive riding clothes, in front of every person who mattered in London, the Duke of Ravencrest knelt before his wife. Gasps erupted. Fans snapped open. Someone, Lady Weatherby, probably, let out a small shriek of delight. "Get up," Evangeline hissed, face flaming. "What are you doing?" "Forgive me," Julian said, his voice carrying in the shocked silence. "Not here. Not like this. I'll do it everywhere, and anywhere for as long as it takes." He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Before we wed, I told my friends you were just a dowry to me. I said I'd barely looked at you. I said it was a business arrangement, nothing more." The crowd's collective inhale was audible. This was scandal beyond measure. Confession beyond propriety. Evangeline's hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Julian continued, his voice steady despite the emotion choking him. "I was a fool. I was blind. And you heard every word, didn't you?" She nodded, unable to speak. "You've spent 5 months showing me exactly who you are. Brilliant. Strategic. Kind to those who can't help you and fierce with those who underestimate you. You've become the most powerful Duchess in England, and I've watched you do it while hating myself for what I threw away before I ever had it." His voice broke. "You're worth more than 1,000 fortunes. More than any title. More than my pride, my estates, my life. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've done nothing to earn your love. But I'm asking, no, I'm begging, for the chance to try. Not as your husband by law, but as a man who wishes to be worthy of you." Evangeline was crying openly now, and half the ladies watching were too. "I love you, Evangeline. I fell in love with you somewhere between the 3rd political salon where you demolished my arguments and the morning I found you in the stables talking to the horses like friends. I love your mind, your strength, your refusal to be anything less than extraordinary. And I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry for making you feel like you were anything less than everything." Evangeline reached for him with trembling hands. Julian. Oh, for heaven's sake, Julian, get off your knees. You'll ruin your breeches. Augusta's voice cut through the moment like a knife. The Dowager Duchess stepped from the carriage, looking supremely satisfied. You may both cease this performance. Though I must say, darling boy, you took longer to grovel than I anticipated. The crowd leaned in, sensing another revelation. Augusta turned to Evangeline. And you, my dear granddaughter, exceeded every expectation. What are you saying? Evangeline asked, though something in her eyes suggested she already knew. Did you truly think it coincidence that you overheard those words? I ensured that door was left ajar. I had my maid mention you'd left your shawl in the music room, which required passing that very corridor. The ton exploded. Whispers became exclamations, became outright gasps of shock. Augusta raised her voice. I needed to know if this girl had the spine to handle my grandson. Your father was stubborn as an ox, Julian, and you're worse. I didn't need a simpering bride who'd run to the country at the first harsh word. I needed someone strong enough to bring you to heel. She gestured at Evangeline. Look at what you've built, child. Look at who you've become. And look at what you've made of him. Julian stood, helping Evangeline from the carriage. She was laughing and crying simultaneously, looking between him and Augusta with something like awe. You're both insane, she said. Probably, Julian agreed. But I'm your particular brand of insane, if you'll have me. Evangeline touched his face, gentle now, the anger that had sustained her for months finally releasing its grip. You truly mean it? You love me? Of course I do. You're the most extraordinary woman I've ever known, and I've been a fool not to see it from the beginning. She studied his face, seeing everything he'd been too proud to show before: vulnerability, hope, desperate love. Then perhaps, Your Grace, she said softly, we might begin again. Properly this time. Julian pulled her close, propriety abandoned, the ton forgotten, everything except this woman in his arms. I warn you, Evangeline whispered against his lips. I quite enjoy having the upper hand. I wouldn't have it any other way, Julian breathed. And there, in Hyde Park, before all of London society, the Duke and Duchess of Ravencrest shared their first real kiss. Months of longing, pain, pride, and finally, love pouring into it. The crowd erupted in applause. Ladies wept. Gentlemen looked at their own wives with new consideration. And Augusta smiled like a cat who'd successfully herded all the mice exactly where she wanted them. Finally, she said, now do get in the carriage, both of you. We have a dinner party tonight, and I expect you'll actually sit together this time. 1 year later, Evangeline and Julian hosted their anniversary ball. She wore emerald silk that made her eyes luminous. He couldn't stop touching her, her hand, her waist, propriety stretched to its limits. They're disgustingly in love, Catherine told her husband, Viscount Thornbury. It's wonderful. Julian pulled Evangeline close during a waltz. Do you remember the library? When you told me you'd overheard? I remember wanting to hurt you as badly as you'd hurt me. Did I ever apologize enough? She pretended to consider. Well, there was the public groveling. The flowers. The terrible sonnets you wrote. You kept them. I kept everything. She touched his face. Even the hurt. It made me who I am. I hate that I hurt you. I know. But I think I needed to be broken a little to realize I could rebuild myself stronger. She kissed him softly. And you needed to be humbled to become the man I could love. Later, they slipped away to the terrace. London glittered below them, and Julian wrapped his arms around his wife, pulling her back against his chest. Do you ever regret it? Evangeline asked. That I'm not the biddable wife you could have had. Every day, he said. She stiffened, but he turned her in his arms. I regret that I wasted even one moment not knowing you, not loving you. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Evangeline That's almost poetic. Did you steal it from one of your terrible sonnets? Absolutely. Did it work? She pulled him down for a kiss that made him forget his own name. Take me upstairs, husband, she whispered. The guests can wait. I've waited long enough for you. They disappeared into Ravencrest House together, finally, completely, home. And in the ballroom below, Augusta raised her glass to the empty terrace and smiled. Some love stories, she thought, begin with passion. But the best ones, the ones that last, begin with pain and pride, then build something stronger from the ashes. She'd tested them both and forged them into something extraordinary. A partnership of equals. A love that could withstand anything. And if she'd been ruthless in her methods, well, that was what Dowager Duchesses did best. If you loved this story of revenge, redemption, and a duke who learned to grovel properly, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Regency romance with a twist. Drop a comment and tell me what your favorite moment was. The public kneeling? The club purchase? Augusta's master plan? And let me know what story you want to see next. Should I do more revenge romance? Or are you ready for something completely different? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.